Hi, and welcome to an introduction to Professional Style APA in the 7th edition. This presentation is brought to you by the CASA Writing Center. Today we will discuss APA formatting, some of the fonts, margins, and just the general bits and pieces of putting together the actual document. We'll look at composing an abstract. We'll look at APA headings, how to organize your papers. We will look at in-text citations, and I will offer you some examples of commonly used references and how to format them. But first, let's look at what APA is. APA is the manuscript and documentation style of the American Psychological Association. It is a style that is typically used in the soft sciences. Specific and in-depth information can be found on the American Psychological Association website and in the manual. So a quick note about APA 7th edition. The APA 7th edition has two formatting options, one for students and one for professional writers or publication writing. Typically, as there is an expectation of publication in graduate writing, whether you do or don't, graduate writers will tend to use the professional version. This particular presentation is going to explore the professional version, but if you have questions about the student version, CASA Writing Center is always here to help. The first thing to look at is just the nuts and bolts of creating your paper. You'll want to use a professional looking font. It can be serif or sans serif, does not matter anymore according to APA 7th edition. You can use a 10 to 12 point font, but make sure it's a legible font. If you're going to use a 10 point font, make sure the font that you're using actually has a larger letter size. You'll still need to use 1-inch margins on all sides. Your text should be left justified, meaning all of your text touches the left side of the page. It should also be a right ragged margin, meaning it breaks on whole words at the end of the right line. You should double space the entire document and then indent the first line of each paragraph 1/2 an inch. The first thing we want to look at in formatting is the running head. So each page of the document should include a running head and a page number. Your running head is going to be a shortened version of your full title, usually about 50 characters. You can see in the example, the longer title is Restless Nights, Sleep Latency Increases and Sleep Quality Decreases with Caffeine Intake. But the shortened running head reads Caffeine-Induced Reductions in Sleep Efficiency. It keeps the spirit of the title, but shortens it down to 50 characters. You'll also want to insert your page numbers using the Insert function in Word in the heading space. So how do you create a running head? In Word, you will either double-click at the very top of the screen and open up the header and footer menu, which is what you're looking at, or you will click the double arrows facing the right side of the screen for other menus. In the header, you will type out your full running head, as you can see again, caffeine-induced reductions in sleep efficiency, and then insert the page number by clicking on the page number menu, going to page number, and then inserting it at the right-hand side on the top of the page. So now let's look at the formatting of the title page. The title page is the only page in which the text should be center justified. You should try to get it about middle of the page as well. Your title page should include the title of the paper in bolded title case. Title case simply means you're going to use the capital letter of the important words. You need to have your name and your affiliation. So what university you're coming from, what college you're writing from, if you are publishing from a research center, what is your affiliation? And then of course an author's note if necessary. Your instructor might ask you for some extra information. Always put the information that the instructor is asking for. This is an example of what a title page should look like. As you can see at the top of the page, we have our running head and we have our page number. We have our title of the paper in bold, title case. We have the author's names and their affiliations. Now you will notice that the author's names have superscript numbers behind them. That's this little 1 and the little 2 right here. This is simply to help correlate which line of text goes with which author. So as you can see, author 1 is from the English department at Eastern Kentucky University, but author 2 comes from the Department of Undergraduate Studies at Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Next you have the author's note. The author's note is going to include a little bit of information about the authors themselves. So it will be used to disclose any changes of affiliation. It can also acknowledge the passing of an author. You will also be able to make any disclosures of any kind, such as conflicts of interest or payments for research. It can also give acknowledgments. So if there's anybody else who really helped out that didn't author the paper, you can put their names in there. Or just provide a professional address so that readers can reach out to the authors and get in contact to have discussions and ask questions. The abstract is just going to be a very short summary of the entire paper. Typically, they run about 150 to 200 words. However, it's also been stated that they can be up to 10% of a paper's length. So if you're writing a 10-page paper, your abstract could technically be 3 pages. However, it's really going to depend on what the purpose of your paper is, and do you really want to spend that much time writing a summary. The abstract is usually formatted into one single paragraph with no indentations, and it should provide an overview of your paper. What are some of the main ideas? What are some of the key points that are discussed? It needs to reflect the purpose and the content of the paper, and it needs to be very concise. That will be the most difficult part. Each sentence needs to convey the most important aspects of your paper. We'll look at an example of an abstract in a moment so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. The next thing in formatting the abstract is that it starts on page 2 of your document. So page 1 is your title page, page 2 is your abstract. You will center the word abstract in bold title case at the top of the page, but do not indent the abstract paragraph. You also might want to consider keywords. Although keywords are not required by the APA manual, your instructors or publishers may require them. However, keywords are just kind of a beneficial tool for the databases that your research shows up in. So these are going to be the key terms that show the focus of your paper. You'll want to choose about 5 or 6 key terms that are really important. You'll put them below the abstract, indented. This is the only line that's indented. And you'll type keywords, italicized and capitalized, with a colon, and then you'll follow it up with the 5 or 6 words. Let's look at the example of the abstract. As you can see, the running head is still at the top of the page, as is the page number. The running head, the shortened title of this paper, is Effects of Age on Detection of Emotion. You'll see that the abstract is bolded, capitalized, and centered, and you do not indent the paragraph. And then it's about 6 lines of text. It's going to go through very quickly and just give a brief overview of the entire document. This cannot be written before your paper is written. You have to write your paper first before you can summarize the whole thing. So this is usually the last piece of the paper that is written. You can see at the bottom of the example, we do have an example of keywords. The word keywords is capitalized and italicized, and then there is a colon. Now, the paper itself is on the effects of age on the detection of emotion. So some of the keywords they chose: aging, attention, information processing, emotion, visual search. Now, the reason they chose these particular keywords is as you're doing your research in the database, typing in effects of age on detection of emotion may only pop up 1 or 2 resources. You really want to try and get your paper into as many hands as possible. So you'll put these keywords down there so that way if somebody is looking at general effects of aging, they might type in the word aging and lo and behold, your research pops up. It may not help everybody, but the wider the net you cast, the better the haul of fishes. So the wider the net for research, the better the haul of sources you're going to have. This is helping your reader, this is helping future authors find ways to get your paper into their net. So headings are not required by APA, but they are a really handy way of organizing your paper. Think back to like outlines when you were in middle school and high school, maybe elementary school if you're old enough like me. But think about outlines and what it was like to write a sentence level outline in which you had your main topic and then your supporting subtopic and the supporting evidence, those are headings. This is exactly what you're doing with your paper. APA has 5 distinct levels of headings. Each one is similar to the levels of the outline with major points and subpoints. As you can see, each level heading has a different formatting. So a level 1 is going to be centered, bolded, title case. This is actually just the title of your paper is a level 1 heading. Any major sections that you put in, like research methods or discussion, this is going to be the level heading that you will use. Your second level heading is going to be flush left, but still look the same. And you'll notice that the text is going to begin on a new paragraph. However, if you start getting down to like the 4th and 5th levels, the text begins on the same line. Basically, APA is very much plug and play. So if you know you'll need to get into, main topic subpoints, sub-subpoints, sub-sub-subpoints, follow the headings, the example of the headings, and just make your heading look exactly like the one on the screen. Here's an example of what I was just talking about. Anytime you're going to move to a different particular level in your paper, you'll want to make sure that you let your reader know what's happening. So now let's look at the APA citation and references. This section is a little bit dense, so settle in. Citing sources in APA is incredibly important. Each reference cited in the text must appear on the reference list and vice versa. This means you cannot pad your references list. So if your professor says I need 20 sources, you got to talk about all 20 sources in the paper. If you cite something in your paper, you got to put it on the reference page, unless it's an interview. We'll talk about that in a moment. APA uses an author date system for citing sources, meaning the author and the date is married information. Anytime you see the author's name, you will always see the date right next to it. When using direct quotations, you will also have to include the page number. Paraphrasing is a little different, so let's just focus on direct quotations at the moment. Introducing your quotation with the narrative citation is going to include the author's last name and then the year in parentheses. You can see in our example, Kritzer, 2003, noted that. So we've introduced our sentence, we've introduced our author. There's been some paraphrasing about overweight Americans, and then the direct quotation in quotation marks remain either in ignorance or outright denial about the health danger to the poor and the young, close quote, but inside the period, open parentheses, P.5, close parentheses. If they are not named in the sentence in a narrative citation, you can use what's called a parenthetical citation. Just means that the information's in the parentheses at the end of the sentence. So again, despite growing numbers of overweight Americans, yada yada yada, open quotation, direct quotation, close quote, open parentheses, Kritzer, comma, 2003, comma, P.5, close parentheses. You need to have all 3 bits of information. If your author does not have a date of publication, you'll do N.D. If there is no page number, you'll either put N.P. or you'll check with your professor about paragraphs. All of this parenthetical information goes inside the period because it is part of the sentence. Paraphrasing is very similar. The only difference is you don't need to use a page number. In paraphrasing, you can either use narrative or parenthetical citations. Now, I want you to notice that there is one difference between these two. It doesn't have anything to do with the paraphrasing. It has to do with the number of authors. In a narrative citation, if you have multiple authors, you will use the word and, A-N-D, and, Tierney and Pearson, 2011. However, if you're using the parenthetical citation, you're going to save a couple of characters and use the ampersand, the little and symbol. Tierney and Pearson, 2011. You will not use the ampersand in a narrative citation, and you will not use the word and in a parenthetical citation. Keep these things in mind. When you're citing a source with multiple authors, you want to make sure that you're doing it correctly, so we have created this handy chart for you. When you are citing one author multiple times, it's always just going to be the author's last name and the year. As you can see, in text and narrative, doesn't change. 2 authors, again, the only real change comes in the use of the word and the ampersand. So be on the lookout for that. Now the next big change is going to be if you have 3 or more authors in text. If you have 3 authors in a piece, so let's say this piece here is D'Agostino, Smith, and Jones. Rather than writing out D'Agostino, Smith, and Jones 2020, you will just write D'Agostino et al. The phrase et al. Is a shortened version of the Latin phrase et alia, and that literally means and others. So what you're saying is D'Agostino and others wrote this piece. If you have a group author or a corporate author, as you may have heard it called, for example, the National Institute of Mental Health, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, the American Heart Association, any kind of entity that puts out authored pieces that does not have a direct author's name on it, these will be considered group or corporate authors. The way you'll handle that, the first time you refer to this author, whether it's in text or parenthetical, you're going to spell out the full entity's name. So you can see here on the 3rd line down, the group author, National Institute of Mental Health, has been fully spelled out. Then in parentheses, in the in-text narrative citation, you have the abbreviation NIM and then the year. Every time you refer to the National Institute of Mental Health in your paper, after you've spelled out the acronym, you can call it NIM. That way, you're not having to type out these long, drawn-out names every time. If the first time you introduce the source, it's going to be in a parenthetical citation, then what you'll do is in the parentheses, again, spell out the whole thing. National Institute of Mental Health. In brackets, you'll put the acronym. This way, from then on out, once again, every time you refer to NIM or the CDC or the AHA, you can just use the acronyms. If there is no acronym or there is no abbreviation, for example, Stanford University. Every time you refer to Stanford University, you have to refer to it as Stanford University. So keep an eye out for these kinds of distinctions when it comes to your authors. This will not only make it easier for you as you're writing, but it also won't gum up your prose so that your reader has a hard time getting through it as well. Because imagine reading a paper that has the words National Institute of Mental Health written 12 times in it. It gets to be a mouthful after a while. Now, remember when I said every single thing that you cite in your text needs to show up on your reference page and vice versa? And I mentioned that interviews were a bit of the exception. This is what we're going to discuss now. A published interview, for example, Cardi B on Jimmy Fallon. That is a published interview. Those are transcripts that are available, whether they be in video form or you go to a website and download the e-reader version, whatever it is. That is an interview that can be accessed at a later date. It has been published. Therefore, this interview needs to show up both in the text and in the reference page. However, a personal interview in which you and the interviewee go and sit down over a cup of coffee and you're talking back and forth and taking notes, or you have emailed back and forth with this person about theories or, I don't know, the sky being blue. Who cares the topic? The point is, if this is not published material, and an email is not considered published material because it's not retrievable by anybody other than the author themselves, then it does not get put on the reference page. Your references are strictly for published retrievable material. To cite a personal communication, you will put the name of the interviewee, Smith, the actual words, personal communication, and as much information on the date as possible. Another thing that doesn't need to be cited in your reference page is any research participation interviews. This is the research that would go in your methodology. The reason you are not required to cite this material is because those participants are the focus of the research. So it is assumed that the work is considered the first reporting. So those do not need to be cited. So APA references and formatting. So here's where we get into a lot of the what the stuff should look like, what these citations should look like. So again, purpose of the reference page is to provide a list of all retrievable sources used within a paper. begin your reference page on a new page following the last body paragraph of your document. That means if you have 4 lines on the last page of the paper, you still have to start a new page. Center and bold the word references, just like we've done with every level 1 heading so far. Your references should always be alphabetized, double-spaced, and utilize the hanging indent. I cannot stress this enough. I cannot tell you how many times we have seen students come in with reference pages that are not alphabetized, that are not double-spaced, and that do not utilize the hanging indent. Nor can I tell you how many times those students have lost points on papers. So, if you take nothing away from this slide only, make sure that it is alphabetized, double space, hanging indent. So this is what your reference page should look like. Here we are at the end of the effects of age on the detection of emotion. We still have our page number at the top of the page. We have our level 1 heading, references. If you only have one citation, it's going to be the word reference. Your citations are flush left. The hanging indent is going to be this blank space underneath the author's name. This makes your reference page easily skimmable by author. So again, someone's reading your paper and they go, you know what? Anderson's made a devil of a point. I want to read that paper. Rather than going through and going, all right, what did Anderson write? And looking for the names of the papers, they see, boom, Anderson. There's all the information that they need. And again, remember, alphabetical order. So here's where we are going to get into the nuts and bolts of the actual references on the reference page. There are different types of citations. There are different types of sources. Books, journal articles, blog posts, lecture notes, web source, governmental documentation, executive reports, you name it, there's a way to cite it. The APA manual is about 400 pages long. There's a lot of resource information in there. So, these are just some of the most commonly used sources available. Typically, what goes in a reference is going to answer the who, what, when, and where. The why is what you're writing about. We need to know who wrote it, when they wrote it, what they wrote, and where we can find it. If you follow that, you should be well on your way to creating the correct citations. A quick note, you will come across quite a few and growing numbers of documents that have DOIs. DOI stands for Digital Object Identifier. Basically, it's a web link where that particular document is permanently housed. The DOI can usually be found on the first page of the journal article or in the retrieval information on the database. Now, sometimes it will look like a website. http://www.doi.com/10.111. If that is the case, you grab the entire link, the whole thing, not just the numbers. All right, so how do you cite a source? If you are looking at a book, an authored book without a DOI from most research databases or print version, that means you have gone into the library and taken a book off a shelf, or you've downloaded the ebook on the database, then what you're going to do is you're going to cite it author's last name, comma, first initial, and middle initial if available. APA does not use full first names, nor do they use title identifiers. They just use the last name and the initials. If there's more than one author, you will use the ampersand, then you will put a final period. So think about each particular section of the citation as its own quote-unquote sentence. So the year is a sentence in its own. In parentheses, year or date, period. The title of the book. This is going to be in sentence casing. What that means is that the first title is capitalized, or the first letter is capitalized, and everything else is lowercase. If there is punctuation mid-title, then you will capitalize the next letter after the punctuation. So if there's a question mark, as you can see in the example, or if there's a colon, you will capitalize it. Then the next thing you're going to want to put in is there an edition? So if this is a first edition book, if this is like fresh off the press, you don't need to put it in there. But let's say you're quoting from like, I don't know, Chicago Manual of Style. I don't know why you'd be doing it, but let's just say you are. You would need to put that you are using the 17th edition because information changes from book to book. So you have to put the edition that you're using, otherwise you risk people looking at the wrong book. And then of course, who is the publisher? Tell us who that person is. If you've come across APA before and you're used to putting the publication city, that's no longer required. So just end at the publisher. Let's say that the source you're using is an authored ebook like a Kindle or an audiobook without a DOI with a non-database URL, meaning you didn't get it from one of the library databases. The first couple of bits of information don't change. You're going to have the author, the first initial and the middle initial. You're going to have the year in parentheses. Each section is going to be separated by its own punctuation. You're going to include the title of the book, again in sentence case, but you're also going to include source type information. So let's look at the example of Cain. We have the title of the book, Quiet, the Power of Introverts in a World That Won't Stop Talking. We have the narrator information in parentheses because the narrator is part of the story. And then in brackets, we have the word audiobook. This tells the reader that the document you pulled from is not a hard copy document. It's published by Random House Audio, and then you're going to include the URL. You can see in the next example that it is an ebook because we don't have the word audiobook, and it is online. So keep these things in mind. So again, this is plug and play. The next type of citation we're going to look at is a chapter in an edited book without a DOI for most academic research databases or a print version. So once again, like the other citations, you're going to start with the author, the year, then you're going to go with the title of the chapter or entry. Now, a note about the author. The author is not going to be the author of the whole book. That will be the editor. The author you will be referencing is the one who wrote the specific chapter. After you include that information, you're going to put the phrase in, and then you're going to use the editor's names. First initial, last name. If there's multiple editors, you'll use ampersand or comma, depending on how many editors you have. First initial, last name. In parentheses, you will write ED period or EDS period. This stands for editors. Next will come the title of the book. Now you'll notice this is italicized. What this does is indicates to your reader, whoever's skimming your references, that that is the title of the entire book or the entire container. The first entry is just part of it. The italicized entry is the entire thing. Then in parentheses after the title of the book, in sentence case still, you will include an edition number if there is one, a volume number if there is one, and most definitely the page range. So take a look at our example. We have all the same information up to the editors in R. Rosner, ed. Principles and Practice of Forensic Psychiatry in italics. They've included a second edition. You'll notice there's no volume number, but they have the page number. Okay, let's look at a journal article with and without a DOI. These are probably going to be the articles you're most used to using. Once again, we have the author and we have the year. That part doesn't change. We have the title of the article in sentence casing. Once again, just like all the other sources we've looked at so far, but here's where it deviates. Title of the journal, which is basically the larger magazine in which this article is published, is going to be in title case, which is all the important words are capitalized, and it's going to be italicized. This is what is going to differentiate the piece, the title, from the whole, the journal. You will also italicize the volume number of the journal, but put the issue number non-italicized in parentheses. You'll then put a comma and the page range, and if you have a DOI, you'll put the DOI. Now remember the DOI screen where I said sometimes it'll look like a full website? This is the example I have here in the Macaulay and Christensen citation. https://doi.org. You want to grab the entire thing. If you don't have a DOI number, you are just going to take the website that you pulled the article from and put that there, the full website. So yeah, it may very well be a 4-line website. That's okay. You also want to remember to leave your links in your reference page live because with the digital age the way it is, most everything is turned in or submitted for publication digitally, and it's read digitally. So your reader can just click on the link and go straight to the straight to the source you're providing to them. If you are using a YouTube video or other streaming site like Vimeo or whatever it is, it's going to be very similar again because you need the author's name every time. But if the author's real name and their screen name is known, then you'll put the author's real name first and then their screen name in brackets. So you can see here, Fogarty M, screen name is Grammar Girl. You want the year, month, and day that you accessed this information. The reason for that is websites change, videos change. So let's say that, down the road, this how to diagram a sentence, absolute basics, changes to another video for some reason. Your reader visits it and sees a video on, I don't know, kittens, as opposed to sentence diagramming. If they see that you accessed it on September 30th, 2016, then they'll be like, okay, reasonably, this website has changed. Once again, title of the video, how to diagram a sentence. You'll do it in sentence casing, as always. And then you're going to put, again, in brackets, the media, the website's name, YouTube, and then the link to the video itself. Let's say you're going to cite a full web page, like the Texas Board of Nursing. You would use the author's name, the full date that the article was published, if you have it, the title of the work, so Be Kind to Yourself, How Self-Compassion Can Improve Your Resiliency, the name of the site, and then the full URL. With websites, it's going to be important to kind of refer to the manual every time you cite them because in some instances you'll want to include a retrieval date, in other instances you won't. There is a lot of information that goes on the internet, so when it comes to the web page, this is a good generic base beginning, but I will always suggest go back to the manual and just double check. You can also go to the APA website, which I provide a QR code and the link to at the end of this presentation. So that way, you can find that information quickly. Speaking of the QR code. So pro tips, use your resources. Writing Center is here for you. If you have questions about your APA style, come to us and let us help you dig into the manuals. We've got 4 copies of the APA manual in the Writing Center, and we have handouts available online. Or you can visit the APA style website yourself. Just scan the QR code, that'll take you straight to the website, and you can go through and look at some of the citations styles that they offer. Want to make an appointment with us? You can either scan the QR code or visit casa.tamucc.edu and then click on the big blue box that says schedule an appointment, or you can email me directly. I am more than happy to help you out. My email address is on the screen. You can also give us a call at 825-3490. That is my direct desk phone. If I don't answer, please feel free to leave me a message and I'll get back with you. Thank you so much for letting me speak with you about APA today. I know it's not always the most exciting topic, but it is one of the most important. So thank you for sitting with me and learning about APA style. Good luck with the rest of your semester. Good luck on writing your papers. And as always, go Islanders!